Microsoft interrupts the installation of the Firefox and Chrome web browsers on its recent Windows Insider build. Plus, Facebook and Twitter, they delete billions of fake accounts in the last several months. What's true and what's false regarding gaming on Linux? We're going to separate a little fact from fiction today. Also, are you a Windows user? If you are, I'm going to show you a bunch of crazy headlines that should convince you to switch to Linux. And some notable releases. Nano, Nextcloud, and the Tor browser all saw new versions released this week. These are 5 stories that I will be taking into account. And the first story on the docket tonight is a disturbing story. Microsoft interrupts the installation of Firefox and Chrome on their recent Windows Insider build. This story over at ghacks.net. This was written by Martin Brinkman, and as always, I will link to all the articles I show you guys on the show in the description. So, reading a little bit here, when you try to install the Firefox or Chrome web browser on a recent Windows 10 version 1809 Insider build, you may notice that the installation gets interrupted by the operating system. And he actually took a screenshot of it. So, you see, you get a pop-up saying, you already have Microsoft Edge, the safer, faster web browser for Windows 10. Would you like to open Microsoft Edge and, forget about installing Firefox and Chrome? You already have Edge. Please open me. And then you see, you can go ahead and install anyway. You see this gray box. It's grayed out. They really don't want you to click that box. You also have the options below. Don't want to be warned about this in the future. You can open up, I guess, some kind of settings panel and try to find how to disable this. Anyway, reading a little further, while there is certainly a chance that Microsoft is just testing things in a preview version of Windows, it is equally possible that such a setting will land in the next feature update for Windows 10. So this Insider build is kind of a testing ground, right? But who's to say that Microsoft is not actually planning on rolling this out for the next major update to Windows 10? And one thing I can say is Microsoft has not learned their lesson. I mean, Microsoft had a really bad time back in the 90s when they tried something like this with Netscape. So, for those of you that weren't around, especially in the early and mid-90s, the very first big web browser was Netscape Navigator. Everybody had it, regardless of what operating system you were running, even on Windows. Everybody used Netscape Navigator. Microsoft wanted to get into the web browser game, so of course they created Internet Explorer. But Internet Explorer was not as good as Netscape Navigator, and everybody was already using Netscape Navigator. So Netscape had like a 90% market share of the browser market there for a little while. And then Microsoft decided they had this brilliant plan. We're going to so tightly integrate Internet Explorer into the operating system, you won't be able to get rid of it. You practically have to use it, and we're going to make it hard to get Netscape Navigator installed on Windows. They did a bunch of stuff. Basically, they killed Netscape as a company, and then they faced an antitrust lawsuit, which they lost. And Microsoft was almost broken up. They almost broke the company up for being a monopoly. They didn't. But it was, a very dark time there for a little while for Microsoft. I mean, they were successful in killing the company, Netscape, that they were trying to kill, but they were severely punished for it. Apparently, they do not learn from their past, because they're obviously trying the same thing with Firefox, which was Netscape's successor. Netscape became Mozilla, which created Firefox. And of course, they're trying the same thing with Google Chrome. So this is very strange. Reading a little more of the article here, companies like Google or Microsoft have used their market position in the past to push their own products. Microsoft has done this before. Google does this. The article mentions Google pushes Chrome on everything, right? They're going to make you use Chrome, or at least push it heavily on Android, Chrome OS, anything that Google has anything to do with. They want you to install the Chrome browser. But, this is taking things a little far when, okay, you're basically, why are you telling me I already have the Microsoft Edge browser? Do I really want to install Firefox or Chrome anyway? If I purposely went to download Firefox and Chrome and install it on the machine, then yes, I want it. This pop-up, this is obscene. The fact that they think that users will stand for this, And it wouldn't shock me if there were more lawsuits down the road if they end up implementing this. Also, who's to say that this will only be for web browsers? Just because they're doing this with Firefox and Chrome, who's to say, when I decide to install some other media player, VLC or some other multimedia app on the system, that I won't get the same kind of pop-up saying, you know what, you already have Windows Media Player, it's safer, it's faster, would you like to open up Windows Media Player? Forget this other thing you're trying to install. Who's to say they won't do it with a plain text editor? You already have Notepad on the system, you don't need whatever else you're trying to get. Anyway, this is very disturbing news. That's why it was the first story tonight, because this really concerns me. Reading a little further, while it seems that Microsoft plans to integrate an option to disable these warnings, it remains to be seen how that will look like. Judging from the current implementation, it will be opt-out, which means that the intercepting prompts are displayed to all users by default who attempt third-party software installations. The article also mentions Microsoft Edge as a browser. It's not doing well. They don't have very big market share, lagging way, way, way behind Chrome and Firefox, and even Internet Explorer in market share. So that may be why they're pushing heavily Microsoft Edge here. But again, who's to say they won't do this with other Microsoft products? Now, I have been telling you guys about Windows. You Windows users, it is a proprietary operating system. And with proprietary operating systems, you really don't own that machine. You don't own that installation of Windows, right? You're basically just renting that thing from Microsoft. That is their operating system. You have no rights. And if you think you do, did you read the end user license agreement when you installed Windows 10? Because if you read that thing, you basically gave Microsoft permission to do anything they want to your machine, and you have no legal recourse whatsoever, because the very last paragraph of the EULA says you cannot sue Microsoft for any reason. You agreed to all that when you install Windows 10. So some people are saying, Windows has changed their ways. They're a new company now that they're embracing Linux and open source, and, Satya Nadella is not evil like Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates. Well, you know what? It's still Microsoft. They're still doing the same things. I mean, this is straight out of, their 1990s playbook with this thing. So I don't like this. And I tell you, what should happen is, if I was Mozilla Firefox and I was Google with Chrome, I would make sure that on those web browsers that any kind of advertising for any kind of Microsoft product was blocked. If Microsoft does this, I think they should fight fire with fire. And I think they should basically make sure that their browsers don't display anything Microsoft related. I mean, if Microsoft can play this, you know what? 3 can play it. So, but that's me. I'm petty. Anyway. And the second story on the docket tonight involves Facebook and Twitter. Recently, the COO of Facebook and the CEO of Twitter, they appeared in front of the U.S. Senate. There was a U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And again, the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, and the COO of Facebook, her name is Sheryl Sandberg, they appeared before this committee. And this committee is investigating basically hacking and possibly the rigging of U.S. elections, how people manipulated it through the use of spamming, and in particular through social networking. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the politics of that, but the COO of Facebook and the CEO of Twitter, they did reveal some really interesting data during the hearing. At least I thought it was pretty interesting. So the COO of Facebook, her name is Sheryl Sandberg. Facebook deleted 1.27 billion fake accounts in 6 months. That is a lot of fake accounts. 1.27 billion, with a B, fake accounts in 6 months. According to Sandberg, the operation was driven by manual review methods as well as with the help of automated review methods powered by machine learning, computer vision, and artificial intelligence, AI. Facebook has been really on the AI train for a little bit. They're really on the forefront of that. Now, that line I just read you said that they did this. They got rid of all these fake accounts with human review and with, of course, with automated review methods. 1.27 billion fake accounts. I'm not sure how you could even do that with human review methods. You probably had to do it completely automated with, computers, algorithms. Anyway, the process of keeping the fake account numbers in control allows Facebook to discover malevolent actors which would take advantage of the platform to possibly spread fake news and skew the public opinion to match their own agenda. So a lot of people have figured out that Facebook, the platform, it's so popular that it is really advantageous for, again, these malevolent actors, basically spammers, and in some cases, terrorist organizations, rogue governments, to spread fake news, to basically spread propaganda to try to push their agenda. According to Sandberg, we have more than doubled the number of people working on safety and security, and now have over 20,000. We review reports in over 50 languages, 24 hours a day. So they have 20,000 people dedicated to safety and security on Facebook. That is a huge number of people working on anything, much less, working on that aspect of Facebook. Switching over to Twitter. So the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, he stated that the social network had to disable between 8.5 million and 10 million accounts each week during 2018 because of automation and spam spreading suspicions. So to do all of that, he mentions Twitter had and still has to create new bot detection tools designed to automate the process of detecting and fighting the automated accounts. Most of the tools employ suspicious account activity to find accounts with questionable behavior, such as a large number of tweets which use the same hashtag and mention the same account without ever receiving a reply. So I won't go into much detail with either the Facebook or Twitter stories other than they are getting spammed to death. According to Twitter, the spam accounts, they accounted for 1% of 2.12 million tweets, including the material related to the elections during this time period that they were analyzing these tweets. So about 1% of the tweets they analyzed were from these automated accounts, these spam accounts at Twitter. So Facebook and Twitter, what do you do? Well, much like I warned you guys with Microsoft Windows proprietary, Facebook and Twitter, they're not free and open source in any way. We really don't know what goes on the back end as far as Facebook and Twitter. They are not open in any sort of way. That is why you may want to explore other options. You guys know I deleted my Facebook and Twitter accounts. I signed up over on DIASPORA and, of course, Mastodon, which I promote heavily on the channel. Mastodon. Love Mastodon. Why things like DIASPORA and Mastodon? Free and open source. The software is completely free and open source. So the community is free to work on it, to change, to patch things as stuff like this happens. If Mastodon is getting pretty popular pretty quickly, it's eventually going to face these, automated attacks and all these fake accounts and multi-accounts. But you know what? You're going to have the free and open source software community working on that thing, fighting this. And you know what? They're going to succeed. They're going to succeed better than Facebook and Twitter ever will. Facebook has more money than God, but they will never stop this sort of thing, where potentially these decentralized social networks that, have this free and open source licensing, I think they're better positioned for this stuff. If you guys are still on Facebook and Twitter, get off of it. Join me over on Mastodon. And the third story on the docket tonight is what's true and what's false regarding gaming on Linux, separating fact from fiction. So this article comes from Forbes. This article is written by Jason Evangelo. Anyway, this article he does in collaboration with Liam Daw from Gaming on Linux. Anyway, my recent journey down the Linux rabbit hole has been challenging, rewarding, and very educational. In the process of covering topics like Ubuntu and Valve's Steam Play initiative here at Forbes, I have had a multitude of Linux-curious gamers reach out and ask about the gaming experience. Anyway, he goes on to discuss basically 2 gaming myths about Linux and 2 brutal truths about gaming on Linux that he discovered. Anyway, let's go over the 2 myths about gaming on Linux. And you've heard these for years, and for years this first one was true. It really hasn't been true really since Steam came to Linux, but you still hear it occasionally. 1, there are no games on Linux. Of course, that's false, right? He goes on to write, so how many games are actually available to play on Linux today? That's a little tricky considering the amount of different stores that actually sell Linux games like Steam, GOG, Itch, Humble Store, so on. So take Steam as an example. Specifically, you're looking at about 4,800 games, where Windows has 23,000 games. So even though we have a lot more games on Linux now than we used to, as a matter of fact, we have thousands, almost 5,000 games for Linux right now, we still don't have anywhere close to the amount of games that you have available on the Windows platform, because you know what? Every single game manufacturer is going to make sure their game runs on Windows. I mean, that is the gaming platform. Linux still lagging way behind in percentage, but you know what? You certainly can't say there are no games on Linux. So it says on Steam specifically, we have about 20% of the library of the Windows library. So still, about 1 in 5 games compared to what Windows has. So his second myth as far as gaming on Linux is 2, Linux users don't buy games. And this is one of those myths that has been floating around for many years that has never been true. A lot of people like to think Linux users don't purchase anything, in this case, games. He goes on to write, I suppose the mentality here is Linux is free, so Linux users must be penny-pinching, budget-conscious, open-source-loving people who expect everything for free, right? No. So there are a lot of us that, use Linux and really like the fact that Linux is free, as in free in cost, but really most people that use Linux, we are here because Linux is free, as in freedom. I would gladly pay for Linux as an operating system monetarily, as long as it still respected my freedom, as long as it was still free and open source, right? Free and open source has nothing to do with cost. I will gladly pay for free and open source software. I think most Linux users would also do the same. Quoting the article here, as the owner of a website where 99% of what we write about is actually proprietary paid-for software, this is Dahl from Gaming on Linux, Linux users get extremely excited about some of the top new releases. We constantly get emails from people to request us to highlight new games and so on. And that's true. When you talk about Linux on gaming, you go to like Linux game forums and subreddits. These people that are running Linux, they get very excited about these big proprietary AAA gaming titles. They want to buy them. They're just begging for Linux clients for these popular games. If they had one, they would pay for it. They would pay for these games more than Windows users would. We would gladly pay a steeper price. And matter of fact, there have been studies done, especially with like the humble indie bundles, where you donate however much money you want for these free games. I mean, we're going to give you the games, but you donate something to us. You know what operating systems users donate more money than anybody else? Linux, by far. Mac users give a little less. Windows users usually give a lot less. That is just the fact. So Linux users will gladly pay for the software that they want to run. So those are 2 myths. Now 2 brutal truths about gaming. Playing Windows games might be disappointing. Very disappointing. Actually, in some cases, this is very true. So when it comes to playing Windows games on Linux, the first thing is to remember it's never going to be a perfect experience. I tell you guys all the time about Wine. I hate Wine. If you're trying to run anything in Wine, don't. If you have some Windows-only software that you just have to run it in Windows. I just told you guys, stay away from Windows. I stay away from Windows, but if I had to use Windows-only software, you know what? I'd use Windows. I really would. I would use Windows before I would use Wine. Wine doesn't work. Playing Windows games, it might be disappointing, as the headline of this brutal truth. I would reword that. Playing Windows games will be disappointing. If you're trying to get some Windows-only game to run on Linux, don't be shocked if it doesn't work at all. Also, don't be shocked if it works, but it doesn't work as expected. Be shocked if it actually works perfectly or even better than it did in Windows. Now, that does happen sometimes, but it's the exception. It is not the rule. The other brutal truth he wants to share with us is Steam Play isn't ready for prime time. So this is interesting here. If you heard about the recent Linux news about Steam Play, it's basically designed to, we just talked about that Windows library in Steam. It's over 23,000 titles. The goal of Valve is with Steam Play to allow all those Windows-only games to be played on any operating system, no matter what you're running. Linux, Mac, Windows. It's created this wine wrapper, they're calling it Proton, this project called Proton that will allow you to play any Windows-only title, regardless of the operating system you're running. Right now, of course, they're focusing on Linux. They're going to focus on Mac. Eventually, Chrome OS may be a focus of this too, because Chromebooks will eventually be powerful enough to game on. So Steam Play isn't ready for prime time. Let me give you a little more information about that, actually. Alright, so let me go to my Mastodon account. So this is my Mastodon page here. Alan Pope, who works for Canonical, just posted not too long ago on my Mastodon timeline this chart here, Steam Play compatibility reports. You guys are not going to be able to see it. The resolution is not very good even on my monitor. It's not going to be good on this, but it shows you game status completely stable, meaning those that reported their games were completely 100% stable, 36%. Stable, so not completely stable, just stable, 24%. And then unstable, about 5%, crashes, 13%, unplayable, about 8%, won't start at all, 14%. So that should tell you a little something. Also, the Steam Play compatibility reports, they have a website here. They have the games that they have whitelisted right here. This is the ones they say are A-OK, go ahead, Proton works just fine. But you know what? There are people leaving reviews on it. So Doom 2016. Let's check it out. Alright, the very first report. Somebody gave it a gold rating 4 hours ago on Solus. So gold is pretty good. It's not platinum, but gold, it kind of works. He's running Solus. It tells us what specs he's running, what Proton version he's running. Somebody running Kubuntu gave it a platinum rating. It tells us what video driver they were using, what CPU they were using, and then you see Bork, meaning it's broken. Ubuntu 1604 LTS using this NVIDIA 396 driver, Bork, right here. Debian 9 64-bit using Mesa. So different operating systems, different GPUs, Bork, fatal error on Debian 9 as well using Mesa. So it might be something to do with Debian and Mesa. Bork, Manjaro using Mesa. Platinum, though, on Ubuntu 1804 using Mesa. So no real rhyme or reason. Some people seem to get Doom running, some don't. And Doom 2016 is actually one of the whitelisted titles. That's one of those original 30 or so, 27 titles that Steam Play said, yeah, go ahead. These work just fine. If I picked another one, let's see, another one to check out. How about Final Fantasy VI here? Only one person has left a review. It was Silver, so not too bad. Anything else? Maybe Tekken 7. Yep. See, first person Platinum, second person Borked, third Platinum, fourth Silver, Gold, then another Bork. Different operating systems, everything from Solus to Arch to Ubuntu, NVIDIA drivers, AMD drivers, Intel CPUs, AMD CPUs. Anyway, so that goes back to Steam Play isn't ready for prime time. And the fourth story on the docket tonight. Are you a Windows user? If you are, I want you to pay very close attention to this next story, because I'm going to show you an article that shows you some of the craziest headlines involving Windows that you've ever seen, and why these headlines should have you running and screaming toward Linux. So this article over at Forbes, this article written by the same author, Jason Evangelo. I didn't realize I had actually included 2 articles by the same fellow, but 5 ridiculous Windows 10 headlines that will have you running to Linux. So when Windows 10 was released, I had high hopes, especially as someone who loathed Windows 8. Ironically, Windows 10 has sent me packing to set up residence in the Linux world. So this guy, he had been writing a lot of articles recently over at Forbes, touting Ubuntu and Steam, especially Steam Play on Linux. What caused him to check out Ubuntu is because Windows, the path, especially Windows 10, is going. So, some articles that he found on the web. He's sharing articles from other websites and why these are some just crazy titled articles, and why Windows users, when they see these things, why are you still on Windows? So the first one, number 1, time to turn off Windows updates, automatic updates, and brace for impact. Why do people put up with Windows and their automatic updates, right? It makes no sense. So this article, I will actually open it. Time to turn off Windows automatic updates, brace for impact. This is from Computer World. Basically, it tells you how to, you can either keep the automatic updates going and face the consequences of that, how sometimes the machine just reboots on its own. It just decides to update when it's ready, how it basically can destroy people's lives. Or you can turn off the automatic updates and, hope for the best in that regards, because your machine may have some security issues. So, anyway, number 2, this article here, 100 common Windows problems and how to solve them. Now, I'm not going to click on that and take you to the article because I think the headline there says it all, right? 100 common Windows problems and how to solve them. 100. Think about, how hard it can be to come up with 100 problems for anything. But this guy, he wrote this article. He had no problem, I guess, coming up with 100 common Windows problems. The Forbes article writer, he says, I don't even know what to say about this. Some of these are probably better categorized as annoyances, but still, these common Windows problems include blasting the advertising away from your lock screen, troubleshooting blue screens of death, removing Windows notification nags, maintaining privacy, avoiding inconvenient reboots, avoiding malware, etc. He says, okay, I'm exhausted. Anyway, you're never going to have somebody write 100 common problems with Linux, Nobody's going to write that article. But the fact that somebody wrote this and wrote it, not being facetious, just, hey, here's 100 common Windows problems we have to deal with all the time. That's crazy. Headline number 3, 8 steps to install Windows patches like a pro. Installing patches. And the fact that it takes 8 steps, I'm not even going to click on the article. How crazy is that? Think about how easy Linux has gotten, how easy it is to install and remove software, how easy it is to update the system. Think about Ubuntu in particular, which the article writer has recently switched to, which is probably why he thinks this is a joke. 8 steps to install Windows patches like a pro. You're never going to see something like that in any kind of Linux distro ever. So that's, anyway. The 4th article, Overcoming Windows 10 Upgrade and Version Failure Updates. This was written by a Microsoft MVP on the Microsoft Answers website. Nothing else to be said about that. Article 5 here, 50% of Windows 10 users have experienced problems. That's the title of this article. 50% of Windows 10 users have experienced problems. Enough said. Anyway, there's some cartoons. I will, of course, link to the article if you guys want to read more into this. This was pretty interesting. I thought it was hilarious, though, but he's right. You see these kinds of Windows 10 headlines all the time about how bad of an operating system Windows is, and nobody thinks about it. If you're running Windows, you're not aware that alternatives like Linux and BSD and other things exist. You just think, well, it's Windows. I have to run Windows. Everybody's running Windows. No, you don't. Again, you see headlines like this, and if you know about Linux, if you're one of the viewers out there, I know I have a lot of Windows viewers that view my content. If you're one of those Windows viewers that is also curious about Linux, give it a shot. Because, again, Microsoft Windows, it is a proprietary operating system. They do not respect your security. They do not respect your privacy. Ran over. And the 5th and final story on the docket tonight is really a combination story. Some notable software releases from this week. Some of the best free and open source programs on the planet saw new versions this week. And of course, the big one, the most popular terminal-based text editor on the planet, maybe? Nano. I'm talking about GNU Nano 3.0, which now reads files 70% faster. Now, I say it's the most popular terminal-based text editor. Actually, VI, or Vim, is installed on every single Unix system on the planet by default. So you always have VI, but Nano is installed on most Linux distributions, especially because VI has a steep learning curve. If you don't know how to use it, it can be a real pain. So Nano is installed on most Linux distributions out of the box, which makes it, again, one of the most popular text editors on the planet. Those who keep forgetting how to exit Vim, according to the article, seek refuge with Nano. So Nano's a godsend for beginners who don't want to learn all the Vim key bindings and everything. Some of the new features in GNU Nano 3.0. Again, read files 70% faster. That is an incredible improvement in performance. Speed of handling ASCII text has been doubled. New shortcuts. Control-Delete erases the next word now. Control-Shift-Delete erases the preceding word. So new key bindings, many other key binding changes. It shows the correct number of lines on the status bar when opening multiple files. It ignores any presses of before a valid command keystroke, recognizes more escape sequences, and it avoids a possible hang-up during full justify. So really nice improvements for Nano. Everybody's favorite text editor that isn't Vim. The next big release, Nextcloud 14, focus on security and compliance. Nextcloud is a very popular free and open source program. It basically allows you to self-host your own cloud instance. Nextcloud is a really cool program. It's designed to keep your data secure while you sync your data and work with other people, yada yada yada. Some of the new features in Nextcloud 14 include the two big ones: video verification and Signal/Telegram/SMS two-factor authentication support. So let's start with video verification, reading a little bit of the article. Video verification is the new unique feature that is meant to ensure that only the right person looks at the data you shared. You might think, well, I put a password on it. Won't that do the trick? It is indeed true that a password for a share link, especially when sent through another channel like SMS, makes it harder for a third party to get access to the files, but there are certainly scenarios where this still happens. It discusses some of those scenarios. Anyway, video verification is really the big new feature for Nextcloud 14. Another big one, Signal, Telegram, SMS, two-factor authentication support. Mentions a couple other things. They're doing a GPDR. I guess they're making Nextcloud more compliant with GDPR for those that care about complying with those laws. Another big release this week is the Tor browser. The Tor browser version 8.0. So for the past year, we have been collecting feedback on how to make the Tor browser work better for you. Tor 8.0, our first stable release based on Firefox 60 ESR, Firefox's extended support release, is now available for Tor browser. Let's see what kind of new features come with the Tor browser. New user onboarding, improved bridge fetching, better language support, and then it gives some known issues. So there are some things that are broken. It says right now WebGL is broken. I also had a note actually at the top of the page. They had some issues with, we received reports that Tor browser is crashing during startup on older Mac OS systems. Yeah, well, that's what you get for running Mac. Mac users, that was a joke. I kid Mac users. Anyway, some of the releases this week. And that was the fifth and final story for this edition of Taking Into Account. This is Taking Into Account, Episode 8. I release a new episode of Taking Into Account every Thursday. So I don't have a set time of day I release it, but every Thursday, sometime on Thursday, I do release Taking Into Account every week. So, as always, other than the 5 main stories I cover, I usually like to end these episodes with reading one viewer question or comment that I received either through Mastodon or Patreon or email. Today's comment I'm going to read is from Reddit. It was not directed directly to me, but it was a post over on Reddit about me. And I wanted to answer it because there may be some confusion among some of you about what I'm doing with Patreon. So, this post over at r/Linux Master Race, I post over at this particular subreddit every now and then, so these folks do know me. Anyway, this particular fella, this user called Ubuntu_Mate, I don't know, guess he's a big Ubuntu Mate fan, he titled this post, DistroTube to go the Brian Lunduke way, will lock videos behind Patreon wall from now onwards. No, At no point did I ever say I was doing anything of the sort. He linked to this video that I made about a week ago. Nowhere on that video did I say I was going to start locking all my content away behind Patreon. I mentioned nothing about following any kind of model that Brian Lunduke is doing. I mean, he's doing his thing, and he's being really successful at it, but that's not what I was planning on doing. Anyway, for those that are wondering, I actually posted a comment to this guy, too, in this Reddit, and I will actually link to this in the show description, but basically, here's what's going on. I had not been really doing anything for my patrons, right? So now what I think I'm going to do is I often pre-record shows, especially shows that are not time sensitive, like tutorials and whatnot. So I'll pre-record them, right? I'll record them, on a Monday, but I may not plan on releasing them for Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday of that week, right? So now what I'm going to do to give my patrons a perk, they deserve it, I'm going to release some videos early to those guys. They'll be able to check it out before what I actually plan to do on the channel, release it on the channel, but it will not affect my YouTube viewers that are not Patreon subscribers at all. You guys won't even know about it, right? You're still going to get all the shows you always got when I plan on releasing them on YouTube anyway, but now, about 4 shows a month I'll release early on Patreon. So those guys have early access to it. They'll get like a week's early access to it. Again, about 4 a month. I release somewhere around 25 to 30 videos a month. So giving those guys early access to about 4 of them a month, I think is not something that most people would object to. And I've had nothing but positive feedback from a lot of you guys about it, so I'm really not sure when this guy over on Reddit made this post, where he got the idea that I was going to start locking all my content away. He also mentioned something about, or somebody did, about the patrons only video chat I did. I live streamed that on YouTube, and as soon as the live stream was over, it was posted on YouTube. It was never locked away behind Patreon. So anyway, I just wanted to clear some of that up. If any of you guys have any other questions about what I'm doing with Patreon, feel free to ask in the comments. Those of you that are Patreon subscribers, ask me on Patreon. Those of you following on Mastodon, feel free to message me on Mastodon. Or if you got my email, or message me on Reddit. I mean, I'm easy to find. Yeah, just ask, especially before you make some kind of sensational headline like this guy did. And I've got to be fair, a lot of people did post, well, a couple of people posted, hey, dude, I watched the video. He said nothing like what you're describing here, so I want to thank those guys for trying to set the record straight for me. Anyway, that was Taking Into Account Episode 8. Before I go, this show was made possible by Ansem, Carlos, David, Leor, and Rob. These guys are the reason this show is possible. They are the producers of the show. They are my highest tier Patreon supporters. The show is also brought to you by the good ladies and gentlemen. You see their names on the screen. If you enjoy this video, please support the channel. Look for me at DistroTube over on Patreon. You guys rock. Peace, guys.